This is how much weight you should be lifting during your workouts. In a minute, I'm going to show you a visual demonstration using the dumbbell shoulder press so you can see exactly what it looks like when you're training hard and maybe even what it looks like when you're not training hard enough. But first, I want to talk about some specific rep schemes. So if we're talking about power training, which you can think of as a combination of speed and strength. If you're using a barbell, we're lifting heavy, but we're still moving the bar relatively quickly. If you're using dumbbells, same thing. You're lifting somewhat heavy, but the weights are moving quickly and of course with control. So power training, you're going to be anywhere from 1 to 5 repetitions. And usually you want to take a pretty long rest so you can recover in between your sets, regain your muscle, regain your strength, and be able to output a good amount of force so you can continue to move the weight quickly. For power, we are looking anywhere between 1 to 5 repetitions. For strength, true raw strength, we're going to be anywhere from 5 to 8 repetitions, and that can even be stretched to about 10 repetitions. Again, we're moving the bar relatively quickly, but the bar speed isn't as fast as if we're power training. So there's still control on the way up, you're exploding, on the way down, you're controlling, but it's a little bit slower than power. Think about a power clean for power and something like a shoulder press for strength. Obviously, there's a lot more exercises for these two types of training, but as a general rule, you're thinking a power clean, somebody is moving the bar really quickly, there's a lot of snap, and then for a shoulder press, somebody's just beasting it and just nice and strong, pushing up and then lowering back down. So the sweet spot for strength, anywhere from 5 to 8 reps. You could go up to 10. You could even go up to 12. There's going to be a little bit of carryover between these rep schemes. Now, if we're talking about muscle growth or hypertrophy, this sweet spot is going to be anywhere from 8 to 12 reps. And you're still going to be working hard. You're still going to be leaving about 1 to 2 reps in reserve most of the time. And when I say reps in reserve, I mean how many reps can you do after you finish a set? Let's say that you do a set of 10 and you finish rep number 10 and you feel like you could do 1 to 2 more reps if you really had to. That means you had 1 to 2 reps in reserve. That's a great spot to be for most of these: power, strength, and hypertrophy. If you finished a set of 10 and you feel like you could do 5 more, the weight was way too light. So next set, you're going to increase the weight and hopefully be closer to that 1 to 2 rep range for reps in reserve. Now, training for hypertrophy is probably the best time to go to failure, but it's not something you want to do for every single set, at least in most cases. So when I train for myself or my online coaching clients, usually the last set of an exercise is where I would tell them to go to failure. So if you're doing 4 sets of dumbbell shoulder press, for example, I'm really leaning on that example, set number 4 would go to failure. But the first 3 sets, you want to leave about 1 to 2 reps in reserve. And then on the last set, set number 4, you can go to true failure. It's important to understand a couple of things. There is going to be carryover between these different rep schemes. So like I said, power is 1 to 5, strength is 5 to 8 or even 10, and then hypertrophy is 8 to 12. Those cross over, and that's perfectly fine. With that being said, a good program is going to sprinkle a little bit of each of these types of training all over it. So somebody shouldn't necessarily be doing just strength training or just power training or just hypertrophy training unless they are sport specific. And in that case, I'm not talking to you. So don't take offense. Don't get upset. If you're a power lifter, there's a good chance you should probably be doing mostly powerlifting. If you're a bodybuilder, there's a good chance you should and probably are doing just hypertrophy training. But if you are the general public, if you are an athlete, especially if you're a hybrid athlete, you should be doing a little bit of power training, a little bit of strength training, and a little bit of hypertrophy training. So there's going to be carryover, and a good solid programs that I write for my online coaching clients, programs that I write for myself have a little bit of each sprinkled in. So I'm gonna set up my weight bench. I'm gonna grab a couple dumbbells. I'm gonna give you a visual example of what it looks like when you're training hard, when you're working hard, and when you're leaving about 1 to 2 reps in reserve. Okay, we're all set up here. Like I said, we're gonna use the dumbbell shoulder press as an example. A really kind of silly way to think about this is if you're not making a funny face towards the end of your set, then you're probably not working hard enough. Another thing that I like to tell people is reps numbers, let's say we're doing a set of 10. Reps numbers 8, 9, and 10 should be significantly more difficult than reps 1, 2, and 3. So if you have any experience training, usually reps 1, 2, and 3, they kind of move really quickly, right? We're not using momentum. We're still in control of the weight, but they move really quickly. And then you get to rep number 7 and things start to slow down just a little bit. Number 8, even slower. Number 9, it starts to slow down. And then number 10 is a lot more difficult than rep number 1. Now, it gets a little bit slower, it gets a little bit more difficult, but it's not complete failure. So when rep number 10 feels more difficult than reps 1, 2, and 3, you know you're in the right spot. Now, it doesn't mean that you want to be going to failure. And failure would look like number 10, you're pushing up and you just can't get it all the way and you end up coming down. Unless your coach or your program specifies go to failure. Then you are literally just going to go until you cannot go anymore. With that being said, if you're going to failure and you're hitting 25 or 30 reps, then the weight is too light. So it comes down to individual. It comes down to the individual. How much weight should you be lifting? That's going to depend on your fitness level, your training age. So just think, if reps numbers 8, 9, and 10 are just as easy as reps 1, 2, and 3, then the weight is too light. You want to increase the weight and work towards getting to a point where 8, 9, and 10 are much more difficult than 1, 2, and 3, but not necessarily going to failure. If for some reason you get to rep number 6 and it starts to get super difficult, 7, and then you can only get to 8. So say I prescribe 10 reps and you get to number 8 and you say, oh shoot, I can only do one more if I really, really have to. Stop at 8, go and grab a couple lighter dumbbells and see if that works. You got to keep in mind, it takes some time to figure out what weights to use for which exercises, right? A lot of people get frustrated because something like a shoulder raise, you can even do it seated, like a shoulder raise with 20 pounds, this is super difficult. So you can see in my face, I'm working pretty hard and I'm only on rep 3. So this is basically too heavy. But if I was to curl these, curling 20 pounds is pretty easy. So every exercise is going to be different. The ceiling on something like a lateral raise or a shoulder raise is much lower than the ceiling on something like a curl. For example, most people are probably never going to shoulder raise or lateral raise 20 pounds. So if you start out at 5 pounds on each side, the highest weight you're ever going to be able to shoulder raise is 20. But if you start out curling 5 pounds, there's a good chance that someday you're going to be able to curl 40 pounds. An even better example would be a deadlift. The ceiling for a deadlift for most people is super high. If you're a beginner, you want to start out with the foundation level of deadlifts, you're going to grab a kettlebell and do a 25-pound kettlebell deadlift. But if you work at kettlebell deadlifts for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, eventually you are going to build up the strength and the technique to be able to do a barbell deadlift for 225 pounds. You can deadlift much more than your body weight if you consistently train that movement for years. But a lateral raise, on the other hand, it doesn't matter how long you train this exercise, you have a ceiling and you're going to be capped with how much weight you can lift because it's not a compound movement. You're using much smaller muscles. So the amount of weight that you lift is going to be very different for each exercise. Just keep in mind the goal that you have and keep in mind the reps in reserve that you want for each of those goals. So to reiterate, power 1 to 5, strength 5 to 10, hypertrophy 8 to 12. If you want to bump it up to 15 for some muscular endurance, that's cool. Even 20 reps for muscular endurance, that's cool. I didn't really spend much time talking about that because I don't train much of that myself or for my clients. Upwards of 20 reps and you're just learning how to do an exercise while you're fatigued. There's really not much carryover to life or performance when you're doing 30 or 50 reps of anything. So I would suggest steering clear of that, sticking between those 3 different rep ranges that I explained. So that is it. That's how you know how much weight you should be lifting during your training. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. If you found this helpful, do me a favor, hit that like button, share this with a friend that you think might find this helpful as well. And last but not least, hit that subscribe button. I appreciate you watching.